Hi, Pam. I haven't seen you in forever, Pam. I need to text you and say how you doing.
Okay, hi. But you won't see me now because my hair is not right.
Okay,
You're going to be able to go back.
I think so.
Oh, no, that's not what I want.
Well, I'm going to get us started while Courtney's making sure she shares the slideshow with you. Can you all see the slideshow or not so much?
I don't see it.
I haven't shared the screen yet.
Never mind. She hasn't shared the screen yet, so that's on me. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce ourselves. I'm Dr. Rebecca Burton, and this is Professor Courtney Jauregui. When you see her name on the screen, yes, it's Jauregui, pronounce it with a H instead of a J. We're both professors of education. Courtney is on the I-Collin campus, and I'm at the Frisco campus. And we're representing from the actual Plano campus here today in one of our education lab rooms. As I was mentioning to any of those on before, we are going to be doing interviews right after this. So hence you get to see the double duo here together inside the education lab. So that's us.
And we're really glad you all are here. For those of you that weren't on a couple minutes before, we weren't sure if anyone would come to a workshop in an afternoon in July. So thank you all for being here for a topic that we really think is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's our goals for this short workshop today. Our goal, first and foremost, is to make sure you do have time at the end. That's something that people always talk about. They wish they could just hear other ideas from other people. And so if we are talking too fast, you can certainly stop us and slow us down, or we can keep plugging along so that you have more opportunity at the end to share with each other some of the techniques that you use. So we want you to consider ways in which you currently engage students using Canvas. That's where you have that opportunity at the end to really share some of the ways that you engage students. So when we're talking engagement, I guess I should clarify a little bit. We're not necessarily talking about the assignments that you're using inside of Canvas. We're talking about the other tools that you can use within Canvas to make sure that students are engaged on a more regular basis and not just engaging in your course when they're taking a quiz or when they're completing an assignment. So I'll put that out there. Like I said, you'll have an opportunity to share ideas with other people. And then hopefully you can leave today with just one idea. We're happy with one. Hopefully you get more, but one idea that you can take with you and try to implement. I am always a big proponent of not trying to build your massive like burger at one time, that you kind of add components to that burger and see if you still like the taste of it before you add more stuff onto it. So add one, maybe two things, but don't try to like go out there and implement a ton of things at once. All right, so here's our agenda. We're going to go over why do we need student engagement? You know, aren't they engaged enough with doing some of those assignments? Two, we're going to give you some tools and strategies that you could use that we've personally used in our classes over a number of years. The time for idea sharing, and then Q&A.
So the first thing we wanted to start with was to really address what sometimes is an elephant in the room when we talk about student engagement. And I have a feeling we're preaching to the choir here because you elected to be here. But I'm sure you've heard someone or maybe had a colleague say, well, that's a waste of time, or why would I use valuable class time, whether that's face-to-face class or online class time, to do things like that. And Rebecca and I would argue that it's absolutely not a waste of time, that there's so many reasons to engage and connect with students beyond grading them. And the other thing we think is that, you know, it is valuable from a learning perspective, and that the time you take will be rewarded, but that the ways you engage also need to be genuine and authentic to you. So you may like some of our ideas, but think, yeah, that's not for me, and that's okay. Not every tool goes in everyone's toolbox. But think about who you are, your personality, your teaching philosophy, your style of teaching, and find ways to engage with students that is genuine and authentic to you. I think that will really resonate with students. And then you also want to adapt to fit your situation. So we are specifically focusing today on things you can do in Canvas, whether that's a fully online class, a blended class, or a face-to-face class with whom you use Canvas. But there are certainly lots and lots of ways to engage students depending on the class structure, format, all of that. So when we think about why do we want to use this valuable time then, we kind of broke it down to the 3 points that really resonated with the two of us. And the first is that engaged students persist. So even when your class is difficult, even when they don't understand something, those students that feel connected tend to stick it out and stick around. Those students that feel connected to you are more likely to reach out and ask questions, seek help, make that Zoom appointment, walk into face-to-face office hours. And that's absolutely what we want our students doing. And then ultimately, why do we all want to engage and connect with students? Because we want our classrooms to be a safe and inviting community for our students. And the more we connect with them and help them connect to us and to each other, we really can create that community.
And I would say sometimes you get resistance, especially from online students. Well, I took an online class, so I don't have to build community. So I don't have to engage with other people. I want to be able to just come into the class when I want to, get what I have to get done, and I'm out. But we know, especially in what we've seen so far with COVID, and even what employers want, they want those soft skills too, that we have learned, if nothing else in COVID, that we have to learn to be able to adapt to a virtual environment and build community in that way. As many are still working from home, many meetings have still been put online. So we need these soft skills built in so they know how to do community building, even though we're not present in the same room with each other.
And this will come up again with one of the tools and strategies we're going to talk about, but we have found that you might have to explicitly address that with students as well. Like, we are forming a community because communities are important, and here's why. And tying it back to soft skills and things employers are looking for does seem to mean something to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to move into some of the ways we use Canvas and various tools and strategies that we use within Canvas. So the first one we want to talk about, some of the things we do, is using Canvas announcements. So I think one thing both of us do is send class-wide announcements after deadlines, after module deadlines, to give some appropriate general feedback, reminders, and that's always good. But there are other things you can do with your announcements as well. One thing we do is weekly things that go out. I call, for my learning framework courses, I call it morning motivation. And for my courses that are in the Associate of Arts in Teaching, I call it Teacher Thoughts Tuesday. And that's really sending out a meme, a quote, something that relates to the course in some way, but also hopefully puts a smile on their face, inspires them, makes them think. And it's been nice. That's something I have seen students come back and comment on. And I will show you a couple of examples here. This is one from one of my learning framework courses. People often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. And I do have to put a reminder that because it's a picture, if they're viewing it, in their email outside of Canvas, the picture doesn't always come through. So reminding them, check this out in Canvas. As well as, if you do something like this, of course, please remember that you do have to go in, put the appropriate alt tag, address the accessibility of your announcement as well. And this is an example from my Intro to Teaching course of a Teacher Thoughts Tuesday. It's a quote from a really great TED Talk by Rita Pearson.
She's amazing. If you haven't seen it, it's awesome. I'll just add to that announcement thing. So I do something similar to Courtney, not quite the same thing. It's a tool that I've used for about 2 years now, where I try to get to know them and they try to get to know me. One of my student evals came back in the spring, which made me happy, that she said, even though we're in an online class, I really felt like she knew me as a person and I knew her as a person. And that's what I want, because I also want them to keep coming back, not only in my spring class, but maybe take my next class with me in the next semester. So what I do is I label each week a different kind of theme. So I might do Throwback Thursday or Wacky Wednesday or Movie Monday. And so what I'll do is I'll just say, like, here's my top favorite movies for Halloween, and put those, what are yours? Or I'll post a picture like, this is the wackiest thing I've ever done. That's my Wacky Wednesday. and I'll put a picture of me, I don't know, ice climbing or something that I've done before. And so they get to share with me something that's outside of the classroom, and I get to share with them. So they see me as more than just, a face behind the screen, but as an actual person.
The other great thing about the announcements is depending, a lot of these are things, if they're not kind of an right now in the moment announcement, these are things you can set up before the semester ever begins. So these morning motivation or teacher thought Tuesday, and I'm thinking even some of yours, you could set up and have it delayed to send out for the entire semester. So you could set it up in August and have it really done for you through December, which is what I typically do. Another way I've used the announcements, I do something and I put ready, set, go. And the first ready, set, go I send out is specifically related to one of those morning motivations. And it's really to try to prompt and encourage them to read the announcements. I offer like a point of extra credit for them telling me what the picture was. And then throughout the semester, when I respond to them and say, great job, extra credit has been entered, and then I say, be on the lookout for future ready, set, goes. And then a couple other times during the semester, I'll send those out. The difference with the other times I send it out is then it becomes content related. And I tie it to something they should have been reading about, looking at, doing in the module for that week. And that's been a lot of fun. And it gives them 1 or 2 points of extra credit, which they're excited about, but also hopefully helps them form that habit of engaging with the announcements in our class.
And the way I do it, just if you don't want to put everything in as extra credit, because I know sometimes it's one of my weaknesses. I'll be like, oh yeah, I forgot to add all that in, at the end, is I just say if they participate like in my Throwback Thursday or my Wacky Wednesday, then I'll put their name in a raffle. And I just do an online raffle where it draws a name, and I'll give that person like 3 points on a quiz or something like that. So that way, if you can't participate all the time, no big deal. But if you participate, here and there, your name still gets in on the raffle. And I've gotten to know you, and you have an opportunity for something a little extra as well.
And the other thing is connecting the students with content. The announcements are a great way to send out things that maybe you come across that is related to something you're doing right now, whether it's a news article, a video clip, or something that relates to something you're doing that you didn't have when you set up the course. And I find that it shows students that you're thinking about the course and the content and adding to it as well. And they seem to appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, Allison, anything from the chat?
No questions, though there have been some great suggestions from some of your attendees here.
Oh, awesome. I can't wait
Fantastic.
to look through those after. Okay, so then moving on
Here is
to
a question from Jenny that just popped up. How do students interact with the announcements?
So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. What I do with those ready, set, goes is in the language of the announcement, I specifically tell them that they have to message me using Canvas inbox with the answer, and that they have until the next module deadline to do that. And that way that gives them a little bit of time depending on when they're seeing the announcement. And then I'm kind of a stickler for following directions. So I also add that if it's past the deadline or they don't submit the answer in the correct way, then they don't get the extra credit point. How about you?
I set up the reply function. So you can set up replies to announcements, or you can turn them off. So I turn them off for everything except for those throwbacks or those Wacky Wednesdays. So those are turned on. And as I post, I do the thing that Courtney said. I set them all up at the beginning. And then when the new one has come out, so we've passed, let's say Taco Tuesday, and now we're on to Wacky Wednesday. I turn off Taco Tuesday, leave on Wacky Wednesday. That way it's just like a finite time that they can work within that discussion board. And then if they've missed it, or not done this discussion board announcement, and if they've missed that one, then they have a new opportunity. And it kind of cycles like that from week to week. And it's not that hard, I promise. It's not like you have to do 13 clicks. It's like 1 click and 1 click. That's it.
And I think that's great, especially for the one where it's people contributing opinions. For the ready, set, goes, especially ones that are content related, where I don't necessarily want them getting the answer from each other. I think the inbox works well for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the next area we wanted to talk about is the discussion board. And for those of you that teach online, my guess is you probably use at least one, possibly more discussion boards. And so I don't know if anything we're going to say here is brand new. It may just be some reminders, but I do believe in having kind of that introduce yourself discussion board. I think it is a good way for students to introduce themselves to you and to each other. But taking that a step further, I would encourage the instructor to absolutely participate in that discussion board by both posting about yourself and then responding to students as well. I find that students do like to know who you are as a person, and that gives you another opportunity, and maybe gives you an opportunity to say things that are different than your CV. Because I know we all have welcome letters and things like that where we show our credentials, but this might be a case where we talk about some of our interests, or I like to read. Do you have any book recommendations? I would also encourage people to put a picture. I encourage it, but not require my students to as well. I tell them I love being able to put faces with names. But again, them being able to see you does help them connect you to a real person rather than just this being who grades them. In addition to that, I always like to go through that first discussion board and as I'm commenting, tell them it's great to meet you, and just telling them I'm glad to have them here, telling them I'm glad they've elected to take this class this semester. And I would say do what you would want your students to do. So model that response, that civility, that back and forth, that really trying to connect to another person. And then again, as I'm commenting on those initial discussion threads, the one thing I do really try to take time to do, and I know Rebecca does this as well, is like pick out something they've said and ask them about it. Whether if it's someone who says, oh, I have 3 kids. Well, how old are your kids? I have a dog. Well, how old is your fur baby? If they like to read, I like to read too. What's the best book you've read recently? What's something you're binge watching? What's a good movie you've seen? Trying to extend that conversation with them, and again, get to know them as people. It does seem to make a difference.
Yes.
A couple of other thoughts with the discussion board. I've seen a lot of classes where you have maybe a class-wide Q&A discussion thread so that students can ask and answer questions to each other. And I think that's great. You might have to remind them it's there and encourage them to use it. Another thing I've heard of and want to try out myself this year is having a discussion thread that's solely kind of for water cooler talk or coffee shop talk, where it's just a chance for students to connect and it doesn't have to be related to the course. I think the only thing I'd say there is you do want to be mindful of going in to monitor it and just make sure that everything's above board.
Can we do gallery walks?
Sure.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've tried to do in the last couple of years is vary up what the discussion boards look like. I know, especially after maybe they've never done online classes until COVID. So just trying some new things where it's not just always posting a question or posting something that they have to do a written response. So one of the things that I've done in my intro to teaching class is we do a virtual gallery walk. And so gallery walks, if we were here face to face, it would be me putting together a poster presentation, and then various groups would come around and learn about my information. And then they would take that information back and respond with it some way. But they've also presented and done their time to share to each other, to every other group. So I put them into groups and they have to create like a digital poster. So something that fills up that, digital space. It could be Canva, it could be, I let them pick the tool. It doesn't matter to me, the platform. And then they post that digital poster on the discussion board, and each group has to basically do that virtual gallery walk. They look at that poster that was presented and they respond to it. And so some of the things that I have them respond to is, what similarities do you find to your content? What are the differences between behaviorism and cognitivism, for example? And then which theory do you see yourself using most likely in the classroom, and why? And so it's allowing them to interact with the material in maybe a different way than just seeing what they've written. I've also had them do videos. I've had them do video editorials where they've had to just post the video editorial on the discussion board. And again, they're responding back to like, what surprised you? What didn't surprise you? What are you most scared of when it comes to this topic? Instead of just like respond to your classmates in 150 words, I give them a little bit more direction in how I want them to engage with the material. But in, new material, not just so written all the time, other opportunities to do something a little bit different.
And I think that's a good point, in that even within the discussion boards, providing that opportunity for difference, we're doing a video instead of a written discussion.
Flipgrids instead of, and you can connect your Flipgrids directly into your discussion boards or assignments, where Flipgrid is an interactive free tool out there on the web where they can post a 1 to 2 minute video about a topic and then other people respond to them. And so Canvas has that partnering function that you can turn that on.
All right, Allison, before we move on, anything?
Yes, there's a question that just popped up from James. Is a gallery walk like a personal dream board or course related topics? Do you have examples of each of these that you can share?
Yes.
The gallery walk and intro to teaching, they learn about different learning theories, behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. And so it is content based. And it's one of the first things I do, and I get a lot of pushback from that. What? Something in groups the first week out? I'm like, well, I don't know any better way of you really getting to know somebody else. So you have somebody immediately to reach out to if you need help. And they use it as that once they get past the initial shock of having to reach out to somebody else in the first 2 weeks of school. But yeah, it's based on course content, and you could use something like Jamboard, or you could use Canva. I've seen them use Adobe products to do their digital posters, because in our classes, we often also have to meet technology standards. They have to be able to utilize technology within a lesson plan. So it's kind of doing that dual purpose there of learning a new piece of technology and doing something technology based within their Canvas class. I don't know if that answered your question or not, hopefully.
I mean, you could do it with something like a vision board or that as well, but you absolutely can do gallery walks
With anything,
with
really.
anything.
I mean, little kids do it in kindergarten classes with showing their favorite pictures of volcanoes, so it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. It's just an opportunity to share a perspective that they have on the content or that topic.
And if you were to do it in a physical classroom, for instance, you would physically, the groups would move from poster to poster or presentation to presentation, like they were visiting a gallery.
Yeah, and I do that instead of presentations in class now. Well, that's the way they do presentations. So instead of just standing up there in front of 30 people, I always do it in gallery walk, and I give them 5 minutes to do their presentation, and we just keep rotating. That way I can grade it on the spot. I've heard everybody, and everybody's constantly moving, and they love it.
It also, again, this is face-to-face, but it allows them to present in a smaller format. So they're presenting to a small group rather than the whole class, which makes some students more comfortable. But it's a great teaching and presentation technique.
Yeah.
And discussion boards are one way to translate it to the online classroom.
But we got up on a tangent. Sorry. We'll stay focused on online.
All right.
Do you have one more question,
sure.
Courtney and Rebecca, from Pam?
Yeah.
Asking about how many people do you usually have in a group, and do you have any pushback if any group members fail to participate?
Yes. And actually, so we were going to talk about Canvas groups at the end, but maybe we just move it up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As Rebecca said, I get the same pushback she gets. Why am I having to do group work in an online class? And so I have found that I sort of have to start by addressing that, and then where possible, scaffold the assignment to build in as much success as possible. And what I mean by that is I have to address, yes, I'm making you do group work in an online class, and here's why. Because we are not hermits. We are going to be expected to work with others the whole rest of our life. As the pandemic has shown, we have to be able to work with others in a virtual environment. Your bosses want you to do this, all those things to kind of start it off. Where time permits, I try to build in a deadline where they have to contact each other by and show proof of that. And that way they can't say, well, I didn't know. And that way it also gives them a deadline where, okay, if this group member hasn't reached out, you all can move on without that group member. And the other thing I do is that even though it's a group assignment, it's individual grades.
Right.
So
I
that
do the
if,
same thing.
you know, person number 4 doesn't contribute anything, it only affects person number 4's grade. And that does seem to relieve a little bit of the anxiety on that, knowing that it's still frustrating and they still do get frustrated, and you will hear about that. But it tends to relieve some of that anxiety. In terms of group, like I think you asked about the number of people in a group. For me, it depends on the assignment. Doing something like the learning theory gallery walk, as Rebecca does, I think I've done that anywhere from 4 to 6 people.
And I do 3 for that assignment. So I think it just depends too on how you see that work divided out, you know, that one person's not stuck with a lighter load than the others. And to piggyback off what Courtney said, my husband's an English professor and he does group work within his English class online. And what he makes them do are progress reports throughout that group time that they have. And sometimes, you know, it's a good accountability and it's a good like documentation for both, because sometimes students will say, well, my group never reached out. And you can say, well, but your progress report said that y'all were working okay and we're working just fine. So which one is it, you know, kind of thing. So that's nice to have some accountability as they're progressing through, to do a progress report and say, how much have you accomplished and what have you accomplished? I also, and I know Courtney does this too, have them do group and self-evaluations at the end. That way we can see, you know, like, what did you contribute and what did they contribute?
And specifically ask that, you know, who were your group members? What did they do? Tell me exactly what you did. And that can be very eye-opening. And then I ask them to grade themselves. And I will say they're often hard.
They are often harder on themselves than I would have done. But you asked about how do you group them? For me, it's never based on interest, to be honest. So what I typically do, and I don't know if this is bad or not, but if it's further into the semester, I will usually group them based on what type of performance and activity that they've already demonstrated over the course of the semester. So if you've been like barely present, you're not really turning stuff in, you're missing deadlines, then I might group you with other people like that. And guess what? Somebody takes that leadership role, somebody gets it done who wasn't used to being leader, not, you know, maybe not in that group. So that's how I do it later in the semester. How I do it early on in the semester is not necessarily based by interest, based on how they performed on that first initial. I do like a quick, like 1-point check on theorists and just kind of what their level of understanding is. And I try to group them based on their readiness and understanding, not necessarily their interest.
And I will sometimes use the Canvas grouping feature and let it be random and let them know that Canvas has randomly created these groups. Full disclosure, I may have said that even when I've purposely moved some people around in groups as well, just so they don't know that I'm intentionally trying to keep people apart.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of it selfishly, I'll just admit, because hopefully we're all friends enough here that selfishly, I don't want to have to field, you know, 15 different emails about this person hasn't responded to me. So if I put in a student that I know like has high touch, needs high touch, they're constantly emailing me and I'm emailing them back. I don't want to put them with somebody who's very low touch because they're probably not going to work well together. But if I can put in the multiple high touch people together, then they typically work better together than putting in a high and a low and a medium, that kind of stuff. That doesn't work for me online at all.
And again, the more you kind of know about your students, the more you may be able to figure out ways you want to group them and what successful groupings for you might be. And going back to then quizzes, because I'm sure most of us use quizzes in some way, shape, or form in our classes. We wanted to talk about some different things we do with quizzes. One is I actually use the quiz platform for my evaluations, my self and group evaluations.
Oh, yeah, me too.
That way there's a way to give them points for addressing each question and it can be open-ended. Another is I do give a syllabus quiz. I make it focus on the things that I think are most important so that they have to look at those things in the syllabus. But I also add a couple of questions at the end. What are you excited to learn about in this course? And then just, is there anything that Professor Jauregui should know about you? And I say, this can be anything. And this is confidential. I'm the only one reading it. I have gone in and I love that because you'll get all different kinds of things from students, whether they work a lot, they're raising children, they're coming back to school,
Expecting a baby.
yes, getting married. And I have found that I don't like when students don't respond to it, but I also understand that this is the first week of class and they may not feel comfortable sharing those things. So what I've added to that is, if you don't have anything to tell me a joke. And I did that this summer and it was fun. I got a few jokes. It made me laugh. I liked it, but that way they couldn't get away with not responding to a question, because that's not a habit I want them getting into. The other thing with that question, again, I use that as an opportunity in the comment area when I grade it to comment on what they've said, even if it's just, thanks so much for sharing that with me. Or, that's so exciting. When are you due? Or when are you getting married? And that's also good to know in case it occurs during the semester. If they express a particular concern with the class, it might be something you can address head on, well, I work a lot. And so you might want to reinforce, okay, you can do this, but time management is going to be really important for you, and just different things. But again, that personal response, even if it's short, again, is a great way to connect with students. Something that I think I'm going to add to my quizzes this semester, again, to connect with students, but to also connect students to content, I think I'm going to be adding an open-ended question at the end of every quiz that says, tell me something you learned that I didn't ask you about.
I like that.
I read that recently and it really kind of has stuck with me. So I think that's a change I'm going to be implementing this fall.
I like
And I'm excited to see what I get from that. Ask me in December. I also think wherever you choose to do this, whether you have them fill out a student information form, on the discussion board, on the syllabus quiz, but ask students what name you should use for them and then use it. I just think that's really important, knowing and using students' names, but then also knowing and using their names, because it's not always what's listed in our roster in Cougar Web. And I think the more, again, they recognize we see them as people and not just grades, I think that's very meaningful for them.
Yes, because I've also had several non-binary and trans students in my classes. So I think that's important because they may not tell you, I've had some students not tell you into the bitter end. Well, I prefer to be called. And I'm thinking, why didn't you just tell me,
And
yes.
same with international students, many of them will give us an easier Americanized name. And again, I go back to them and say, but what do you prefer to be called? I want to call you by the name you want to be called. You don't have to make it easy on me.
Right.
So just again, kind of meeting our students where they're at.
Okay, our next part is on the comment areas, like putting in something for the comment section. One of the things, again, that a student commented on in my student evaluations was the fact that it looked like I could relate to whatever they were putting out there, because I usually put something in their comments. So in teaching, let's say like learning framework, with some of their written assignments, I may not read every detail really, really closely, but I may have really honed in on this one part, and I'll address that in my comment section. Like, oh my gosh, I know it's so hard to balance everything. I had 2 kids in the middle of my doctorate and I was working full time. I know how stressful that is. Hang in there. If I can do it, you can do it too, kind of thing. And so I'll pick out something, like Courtney's mentioned before, I'll pick out something that I can address in everything that they turn in. But I also don't have a kabillion and one assignments that they're doing every week either, so that I can take the time to give the feedback that they really need. What I've also committed to do, and I've gone in like full force and whole hog at this point, is any major assignment that I have in any of my online classes, I do a video comment now. My video comments aren't any longer than 2 minutes long. It's just what I would have said if I was typing everything out. And I actually like it better, and so do my students. I specifically asked for feedback at the end of this semester, even in my face-to-face. I'm like, what did you like? Did you like that I do video comments? Because you see me, 3 times a week or whatever anyway. Was that still helpful? And they're like, absolutely, yes. We can see your look on your face. We can hear your tone. We can see your expressions and your hand gestures. So we know like how you're saying it, not just what you're saying. And some people said, yeah, I listened to it in the car, or I listened to it several times when I was cooking dinner, or I would pause what you said and work on it and then go back and listen again. So I've committed to do that. And it doesn't take me any more time grading than it would have to provide written feedback, because that still takes me a long time to type it out. And this way I can just talk, and I can talk with them about the assignment. And then I still use a rubric where I say, this is where you fell, but here's specifically what I really want you to work on for next time. So I really like that. My husband's been doing it for years and years and years, and he finally got me on board. And I think it's a great way, and it really keeps them engaged. I'm getting not only better engagement, but I'm getting better performance as well, instead of the written, where sometimes if I can just write like your learning objective had 2 verbs and it didn't match Bloom's, sometimes it's harder for them to digest and process than me just talking it out and pulling up their assignment and saying, see, this is what I'm talking about here and here. And you can tell I'm already very animated using hand motions there. And so they like that a lot better. And for whatever reason, it just clicks and gels easier in their brain about what they need to do to fix their lesson plans moving forward. So I really like using the comment box for video-based comments.
And I think I would add to that not I can't think of how to phrase this better, not to blow smoke at students, but I really try to point out something positive, regardless of how much other constructive feedback they need, even if all I can say is this was a good start. At least telling them that. I find that they're more receptive to the constructive feedback if I can say something positive that they've done. Now, if they haven't turned it in at all, I haven't found a positive for that, and I don't pretend that there is one. But if they've turned something in, I try to find something I can address that's good, in addition to the things that may need work on it. The other thing, and we sort of addressed this multiple times already, but again, if there's something specific I can comment on or point out, or even ask a question about, there is a particular vision board project I do in one of my classes, and I'll ask every student that turns it in, how did it feel to put some of your goals in front of you in this way? And some of them will actually respond back to that, and I love it. So I encourage you to think about asking questions as part of your comments, because you may get even just 1 or 2 students that answer, that's still 1 or 2 students that have connected back to you.
Yeah, and if you want to save time on that one, Canvas now has that feedback library that if you just start typing in the first couple of words, or if you just click on that comment box and do the drop down, then you're saving yourself that extra time of typing if you have the same message you want to send again and again and again.
All right, Alice, checking in.
Yes, I have, James asked a question a few minutes ago about how do you ensure you're balanced and giving comments and support relatively evenly across all students?
I think for me, it's making sure that I have in my own head, like my boundaries of how long it's going to be. So I really don't go over 2 minutes. If I feel like I have to do more than 2 minutes, then that's probably, maybe there's more like reteaching that needs to happen with that student. But I try to make my goal at least 45 seconds, which seems really short, but not when you're talking. It's a lot you can fill in 45 seconds. Between 45 seconds and 2 minutes, just so I can keep it kind of flowing and on track, and I'm making sure that I hit every single student.
And I would say I make a point to try to hit every student, but not necessarily in all the same ways on the same day. Some don't need all the constructive feedback. They may just need the pat on the back because they really got it and did well on it, and it's just pointing out something they did well. So I don't have a blanket answer to that, unfortunately. It really sort of depends on the student, and there will be students that need more.
Yeah. I know my husband kind of does something similar. I know he spends way longer than I do. I'm kind of like direct, get it done, let's go. And he definitely gives more of that filler on either end. And his are about 3 to 4 minutes long. And when he does comments, and he's an English prof, guys. So you know that an English prof, they have a lot of reading to do from these assignments, and he still takes the time to do that, and he gets better results. So I think it's worth doing some of those video chats, in my personal opinion. Because I don't know about you, but it drives me crazy. If I provide a written comment and they don't even look at it or address it or do nothing with it for the second go around, makes me nuts.
Absolutely.
But moving on to Canvas Inbox and Canvas Gradebook, I know we're running, of course, we put in more stuff than we needed to. But I've already addressed like Canvas Studio. We've talked about that. I use Canvas Studio to do the video comments that I can put right in there.
And I would just add, Rebecca and I were just talking about this last week, especially in the online classes, put yourself in the video. I really recommend and encourage a welcome video where you're really just talking about you. And the reason I say that is I met with one of my summer one students, and she specifically told me how much those videos mean to her in an online class. Like, I felt like I kind of knew who you were as a professor because you had that video. And she mentioned other courses that do that. So it wasn't just me. But that is something specifically that means something to her. And man, that's all I need to hear to know that. Yeah, I'm absolutely going to do that. So, and I will say, I hate being on video. When I do lecture videos, I would prefer to not be on that. But that again reinforces the need that they do need to see you, and I need to kick myself out of my comfort zone and make sure I'm doing that even more than I do.
Yes. And they don't, again, those don't have to be long. I have lecture videos in every one of my modules. They don't have to be long. Mine never go over 10 minutes ever. Like, I'm not one of those people that does an hour long or 2 hours, because I know that they won't last. And if there's multiple things, I usually break it up in multiple videos. So they know, well, I just need to go back and I need to listen to the blooms. I don't need to listen to this and bloom. So I'll break it up onto different pages and do it that way. And you can use Studio. I have a YouTube channel. You're welcome to Google me and look me up and see some of the ones that I've done. They like them. I don't know why, but they do. They like them. They like them shorter than 10. But I was just going to quickly plug our Access office. I had a deaf and hard of hearing student this summer, and I was doing a lot of things through Studio. And man, they were getting transcripts out very quickly. So if you will just let them know, hey, I would just give them the name of the video and where it was located in Canvas, and they would provide the transcripts. So that was easy.
And I would go back to Rebecca's hamburger analogy from the beginning. Look, I'm bringing it full circle. If you're not currently doing videos, maybe start with a welcome video or a video that helps them orient and navigate your course, and then add as you can. Again, it doesn't have to be, I need to create 20 videos this summer. Maybe you can create 2 or 3 to really have that presence and connection in your class. Videos that maybe introduce a module, videos that maybe introduce a key assessment or major project paper or assignment. You know, think small to get started, but I think that the getting started and letting them see you is really a key.
Yeah. And then our last thing is Canvas Inbox or Canvas Gradebook messaging. So one of the things that I stole from Brittany Moore, so I'm going to give a shout out to Brittany. She did something called mea culpa, and I've gone ahead and included it too. So I give 2 mea culpas to all my classes, regardless of modality, at the beginning of every semester. And that allows them to turn in an assignment up to 24 hours late without any penalty. Now, I don't do penalty. Other people do penalties. Like my husband does the same thing, but they have to give them like extra. So I don't do anything like that. I don't do extra points off. But you have 2 chances. It's just life happens is what Courtney calls it. Life happens. I'm sorry. It was totally me. It's not like I have COVID. It's that, I stayed out a little too late last night partying with the 4th of July, and I just need my extra 24 hours. Okay. No judgment here. You got 2. But instead of having them put it in the box, so I don't have to go back and open it up or extend it or find it in a comment, I just have 2 separate submission boxes, mea culpa 1 and mea culpa 2. And I set it to where they can only turn into that box 1 time. There's a setting on Canvas for that. So once they used them, they've used them. It's done, and they choose when they use them. So that I, choose wisely, my friend, coming back from or quoting Indiana Jones, choose wisely because you don't get any more. But I think it helps for some of those students that are like, man, I totally missed the deadline. Now I'm down on myself. I'm not going to be able to recoup or recover. Dang it, and I'm too scared to go ask the professor for some help or to ask the professor for an extension. They don't even have to ask my permission. They just put them in the mea culpas and boom, I know where to find them. That way on the grade book too, I use my, like my to-do on the side. If I see, okay, well, I've graded all my lesson plan part 1, but oh, I have a mea culpa, then I know I have to go back and do that again. Or if they've just put it in a comment or emailed it to me, then it's not attached to their academic record. In the comment section, I'll forget. So that's why I like the mea culpas or the life happens or whatever you want to call it. My other sweet mate, Ryan, uses a different name for it. And I don't remember what it was. Ryan, if you're on, you can put it in the chat.
The other great thing about the grade book is you can use the drop-down menu to message all students who. And so one thing I do is the morning after I've had a deadline is the first thing I go through and do is message all students who didn't submit. And I am careful with my wording and I like to say, I noticed that you were unable to submit by last night's deadline. I hope everything's okay. And then I go and remind them of what the policies and procedures are for the course and what they can do about that. But I have found that adding that I hope everything's okay. Sometimes I get students who respond, thank you so much for asking. I just ran out of time. I'm going to get it submitted or whatever, depending on what the assignment is. But just kind of giving them the grace with how you word that and just not assuming they didn't want to do it or they just didn't do it. I think sets them at ease and again, makes you more approachable in the future if they do have some extenuating circumstances or need to discuss it with you or that.
Yeah, definitely. Should we move on to this part?
Yeah. So then just some of our additional strategies before we want to open it up and hear all of your strategies, because we want to take things away too. We already talked about knowing and using student names. Rebecca and I both kind of getting back to this knowing and connecting to students think that requiring a meeting with you can be very beneficial, whether you do it up front, whether you do it multiple times, do it as a midterm check-in, but it makes you less scary. Once they have to do it and do it, they realize they can do it. They may learn your process for scheduling an appointment with you. For example, I use Calendly. And so kind of once they've done that and realize, wow, that was really easy. And I didn't even have to go back and forth with you to set a time. I think it makes them comfortable with that. But I feel like having that face-to-face, whether it's in person or on Zoom, really does make a difference even for those online students.
Yeah, and I got a ton of feedback back on when I taught learning framework in the fall and did that. I couldn't believe how many people commented on the student evaluation that she made me come do it and I didn't really want to go do it, but then I was so glad that I did. So I have it connected to assignments. So in 1300, I have it connected to, they have to write SMART goals. And so I read their SMART goals and I say, okay, now come and have a meeting and chat with me about these and let's see how we can make them better. Let's see how we can meet these targets. In my 1301 class, I have them come in and talk to me about their degree future to make sure they're taking the right classes at the right time and that they're makes with education degrees. I don't know if y'all know, but they are complicated. And every university has a different kind of system. So that's when they come in and talk to me in 1301. So those are just two ways that you can connect it to a course thing, or you can just connect it to something broader, like what's your future? And I know some of you might be saying, wow, this is a lot. I can't believe, do they actually really engage with students this much? Yes, we do. And Courtney and I teach 7 to 8 classes a semester. And we do it with every single one of our classes. So it can be done. You just have to get, a system and a routine and get, just consistent about it. And it becomes easier as you go.
It does. And again, it's about finding what works for you, what is authentic to you. That doesn't mean just because we said it, this is everything you should do, or that would appeal to you. But hopefully within that, you can find ways that are meaningful to you, that are authentic to you, and that you would be willing to try with students. And so with that, we would love for you to come off of mute,
Yes.
or go in the chat and share some of the things you guys are doing so that we can learn from you.
Rebecca and Courtney, while we're waiting for people to start sharing, James did post another question. Going back to the mea culpas that you were talking about. He asks, so for record purposes, you keep the late assignments in one of the 2 late assignments. Can you or do you move the late assignment into the original assignment record?
That's a great question. So I leave the assignment in the mea culpa, but in the original submission box, let's say it was lesson plan part 1, I'll put a comment in that one, use mea culpa 1, see mea culpa 1 for the assignment. So I don't have to copy and paste, but I do know like where it went. If I'm pulling up their assignment again and don't see anything there, then it's a reminder to me, oh yeah, I have it in my mea culpa 1.
And I do it a little bit differently, but I told Rebecca after we'd been discussing this that I may try the separate submission area this fall. I actually make them, I tell them they can use it for whatever reason, and I call mine life happens, and I actually in a long semester give them a week. It gives them a week
So she's nicer
extension.
than I am.
But I only have one. And so I actually reopen the submission area for them so that it goes into the initial submission area with the original rubric. That part takes a little time where I'm thinking, wow, having this separate area that I don't have to open and close sounds very appealing to me, which is why I might try it. But I would still do the grade in the original submission area because I pretty much use rubrics for everything. Too. And that way they have the graded rubric. But again, like Rebecca said, I would put that comment then submitted here so that there is a record of that and a trail of where that assignment is.
Yeah, and I do grade it within the original assignment because like Courtney, I use a rubric, and some assignments are 15 points and some are 25 and some are 100. So, if they choose to use it on a 15-pointer, then they did. But the grade is still in the original box, and I just put a 0 into the mea culpa that shows me that I've graded it and they've used it. That way it's not affecting their grade. The mea culpa doesn't have to be necessarily in any kind of weighted category. So the grade is in the original, but the actual documentation for that is in the mea culpa. And I'm not saying that's a perfect way to do it, but that's just the way I've been rolling with it so far.
And then it was silent.
Mm-hmm.
People are sharing some things in the chat. If you're able to open that up, you can read them.
There we go.
Oh, I love how you blend your comments, and I do the same thing after I've seen them, what they've done, and I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do to address it in class. We also call that formative and ongoing assessment.
Oh, I love this.
That. Yeah.
How to write a professional email.
Amen to that. Keep doing that, Emily.
I was on Twitter this weekend and a professor was talking about how in their syllabus, they're actually incorporating some email templates that students could follow for. Here's how you write me an email if you're requesting an extension. Here's how to write me an email for this. And that's honestly not something I had really thought about before, but giving students those explicit examples and instructions on how to do that is way better than maybe some of the informal emails we get from them sometimes.
Oh yeah, Ryan is on here. So Ryan did put how he used his mea culpas. He gives extra credit if the passes go unused. Yeah, and you know what? So there's a question too. Well, do you see that students are taking advantage of that? Not at all. Like out of my class of 25 online students, I might have 5 or 6 maybe total that have used it.
I will say, and I only went to using, and again, I call mine Life Happens, just in the last 2 years, and many students have commented on it on the student evaluations that they really appreciate, one life happening, not being the be all and end all for the course. And I do have some exclusions on what it can be used on. For instance, it can't be used on final exam week or for the final project they do in the course, because there's just not the turnaround time for that.
I see that you use Jamboard. I've also used Padlet, and they each have a section on Padlet to go and research. I use it for CRT, not the scary one that everybody's talking about right now. It's culturally responsive teaching. And they use that to talk about the research that they found and the strategies that they used. And then we use that as small group discussion. So almost like a flip scenario. So Padlet's great for that too. Jamboard, I've used that as well. Jamboard's easy because it's connected to Google.
I'm having fun reading these ideas that are
Yeah.
coming in. I love it.
I love the new articles related to the course. I mean, I think we need to encourage that idea of being aware of what's happening in our surroundings.
Absolutely.
Modeling is underutilized. Yes, it is, my friend. I didn't even catch who said that. Oh, John Patrick Williams. Yes. Courtney's big into that. She's like, we need to model and enforce civility. You need to say thank you. You need to say please. You need to use the person's name. So I know Courtney does that very well. Ah, good. I got a taker on the video comments. Telling you, it saves me a ton of time. The part that takes me the longest is waiting for Canvas to upload it. You know, I'm like, ugh. But I can go do something else on online while I'm waiting that minute or two. Yes, I set up mine Canvas beforehand too. I'm not good. Once I get into the momentum, it's like my head goes down and I just keep plugging along.
Oh, I liked this from Mindy. So messaging students 24 hours before
great.
something's due, just to make sure it's on their radar. And that's the great thing about the analytics in Canvas is you can see who's been in, what pages they've looked at and that. And so that, I love that.
Oh yeah, we love, as educators, we love podcasts and TED Talks. We use those quite a bit. I use them for tic-tac-toe boards and some choice options. I also use them as discussion topics, listen to it, and then we're going to do like a round robin discussion.
I've actually started incorporating some TED Talks into my discussion boards and have them discussing that and then trying to relate it to the current module content. And I've gotten really positive feedback on that this summer.
There we go.
We're too still.
I know. All right. Well, we are 3 minutes. We want to be respectful of your time and also respectful of our time since we have somebody coming in any minute now.
Okay, can you? Well, okay, here,
Oh
I'll
yeah,
do
we
it.
have to go.
We're going to
back to that.
stop
We're going to stop sharing and we're going to place in the chat our emails and we're going to also place in a link to different resources. So Courtney's going to do that for you now. It's a link to our presentation. It's a link to a resource page and our emails we are going to post in chat. And Emily, I'm serious. I think it was Emily going to Angel Fire. If you need any suggestions, I'm not kidding. You can email me and I'll tell you, like, buy your own meat before you go because it's expensive there.
Again, we want to thank you all. I'm really excited to see the transcript of this so we can see all the comments we missed when we were screen sharing. But we really appreciate you all being here and just considering this topic. I think all of us are here because we like students and just the more we can connect and engage with them, the better. But we also just love to talk teaching because that's what we do. We're so funny. So anytime, if you want to talk teaching, please reach out to us because this really is what we do.
Yes, and we love it.
We love it.
She's my Bert to my Ernie. So we're
Cool.
right?
I have to dissect that.
I can be Bert and you can be Ernie. I'm fine with that.
But again, I know it's a summer afternoon and you chose to be here and we are so grateful for that. And we're excited to hear your ideas, but also hear which of these ideas maybe you try this fall or in summer too.
Yep. Reach out. We're happy to share examples. We don't hoard. So if you want an example of anything, we're happy to share.
And with that, we'll say thank